All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome in. So in this one, I wanted to ask the question, could the New York Jets trade up to the top of the draft to select a quarterback? Now, we talked about the potential with, a quarterback maybe falling to the Jets at spot number 7 and kind of just going through that possibility, right? Just breaking down each team's needs, the realistic chance of, the teams picking in front of the New York Jets selecting a QB. But again, in this one, could the Jets actually package picks, maybe a player, and move up to the top of the draft, whether that's at spot number 1 or spot number 2. Now, right off the bat, when you're talking about trading up to the top of the draft, my mind instantly jumps to, and a lot of people's minds jump to, okay, you're trading a ton, you're trading away a humongous package in return for that top pick. Think of like when the Rams traded up for Robert Griffin III, or even when the Rams traded up for Jared Goff. What was that compensation, like 6 total picks or something? I mean, they gave up a ton to go up and go land these quarterbacks. I mean, even when the Jets traded up back in 2018, when they went from 6 to 3, what did that cost? It cost the 6th overall pick and 3 second rounders. So, it's pretty expensive to move when we're talking about cracking into that top 5. But then, of course, we have other drafts, right, where the compensation isn't all that high, right? Think of like when the Dolphins traded up to spot number 3 for Deion Jordan, right, the edge rusher from Oregon. What they gave up. I don't think it's going to be a situation like that. Personally, I feel like this draft class, it's going to be somewhere in the middle. Somewhere in the middle. It's not going to be like the Darnold class. It's not going to be like the 2013 class again with Deion Jordan, that trade up. Every draft class is rated differently. It's about the prospects. It's not necessarily about the picks. And when I'm specifically looking at this draft class, you can definitely argue that the Tennessee Titans could look to trade down. With first-year GM Mike Borgonzi, you could argue that the Cleveland Browns could look to move down. Right, with trying to fill holes. Is this going to be Stefanski's last season? But of course, both teams need quarterbacks, right? So that's the interesting debate, and that's the power that these two teams hold. Personally, what I think it would take to go from pick number 7 to pick number 1 or pick number 2. Personally, what I think it would look like for the Jets to move from spot number 7 to pick number 1 or pick number 2 would be something similar to what the Eagles gave up to go up and select Carson Wentz, right? When they traded up from pick 8 to pick number 2. I don't think it's going to be this crazy haul that the Jets would have to, sacrifice. I think it would be totally realistic and fair. That's really how I'm viewing this draft class, how I'm viewing the prospects up at the top of the draft. Now, here's the curveball. Because the Giants, at this point in time, right, February, we don't know what's going to happen in free agency, what happens if whatever they sign Sam Darnold or trade for Matt Stafford, whatever the Giants do. But if they don't, the Browns and the Titans could technically say to the Jets, hey, you know what? The Giants are desperate for a quarterback. You are coming up for a quarterback because of this situation, because everyone knows the cards that everyone is holding. You need to pay us more. You need to pay us more to get in front of the Giants. They're going to get one. We know that they're going to take one, and we know that you want one. So because of that, we hold the cards here. We hold the power. I mean, it should be really, really interesting to see how this whole thing plays out, especially with all these new rumors coming out about the Titans potentially passing on one of these quarterbacks. Again, because it's Borgonzi's first season, is he really looking to select a quarterback, or is he trying to round out this roster first? Is he trying to maybe make a splash type of trade to supply him extra picks to really build the team out? You can definitely make that argument. We've seen more rumblings as time is going on here. I think the Combine week is going to be huge. We're going to be getting a ton of rumors in that week. But I got to be honest, I just don't see the Jets trading up at this point in time. Why? Because much like the Titans, they have a lot of roster holes as well. If the Jets are sacrificing a future first-round pick, maybe a second-round pick in this season's class, maybe along with like a later-round pick, like a 4th or a 5th, you're looking at the Jets right now. The roster construction from Joe Douglas is not good, right? That's just the bottom line. Yes, they're top heavy with some core players, some big name core players, top 10 picks like Gardner and Garrett Wilson. Breece Hall was the RB1 in that class. Of course, AVT first round pick, Joe Tippmann second round pick, Olu Fashanu first round pick, Braylon Allen, right, a solid mid round pick there. And the list goes on. But the overall, again, roster construction is not good. There's so many holes on this roster for what the Jets were spending on the roster. You're taking a look at the positions of need. There are so many. We have to, like, we've talked about the team needs a lot, but just to quickly run through them: defensive tackle, linebacker, especially if Sherwood and Mosley leave, especially if that's the case, cornerback 2. I would say probably 2 starting safeties, a rotational edge rusher. That's just on defense. What about on offense, right? Right tackle, tight end. Quarterback's I would say a pretty big need at this point in time. And then you, of course, have wide receiver. If the Jets go out and cut Lazard and Devontae Adams, we're looking at a receiving core of Garrett Wilson, Corley, and Gibson. Yeah, we're going to need to add a perimeter threat. Yeah, we're going to need to add speed at this, in this wide receiver core. This roster is very incomplete. So is a team like that willing to trade away draft picks, in other words, starting players, or theoretically starting players in the future, for a quarterback? I just don't think so. Now, if a quarterback falls to the Jets at spot number 7, I think that opens up the conversation. That opens up the door. Okay, one is sitting here. We don't have to pay we don't have to give up a future first or, future second, whatever it is. We could just go out and select our guy now. That's a different story. But ultimately, here's the deal, right? This is how I'm viewing it. If the Jets trade up to pick number 1, pick number 2, if a quarterback falls to the Jets as pick number 7 and they select one, if they select Jackson Dart in round 2 at 42, I can't argue with it, because I want the Jets, so I have my own personal quarterback rankings. And actually, quick little side note, let's actually just talk in depth about the top 2 guys here, right? Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders. Let's talk about Cam Ward first. So this is someone, to me, who, of course, right, he has arm strength, he has mobility, he has just this electric sense about him. I love how tough he is. He's constantly faced adversity throughout the course of his college career, and he continues to make defenses pay. He slides around in the pocket really, really well. He can throw from multiple arm slots. 6'2", 225. He's dominated and won everywhere he's gone. Everywhere Cam Ward has been a part of, Cam Ward has looked really, really good and has torched defenses. And, of course, his past season at Miami was his best overall season. Just putting up fantastic numbers. Miami obviously was one of the best teams in the country. And you listen to Cam Ward in interviews, you listen to how the coaches speak about Cam Ward, they freaking love him. He's one of the guys. He's a great teammate. He's a hard worker. He loves the game. He loves football. And I personally love that, right? As a fan, you don't want to be hearing Jay Cutler style of rumors about a potential quarterback prospect that your team could select, right? Obviously. But Cam Ward, he has this really, really, I would say, innate ability to fit tight window footballs deep down the field, right? There's countless plays where he snaps the ball, he drops back, no one's open, he escapes the pocket, he's scrambling, similar to a Pat Mahomes or even a Caleb Williams. He's looking down the field, keeping his eyes down the field. He identifies where he's going to throw, whatever it is. It could be 30, 40 yards down the field, and he'll just rip one right down the field. Perfect ball placement. The ball can only be in one spot, and that's where it is. That gets people excited, right? That ability, because you're looking at the top quarterbacks in the NFL. It's guys with that elite ball placement. It's guys that have that style of playmaking ability. But of course, there's some cons, right? I feel like Cam Ward is probably not ready to play right now. That's not necessarily his fault. It's just the reality. I don't think Cam Ward is ready to start day one right out of the gate and to put up great numbers. Ideally, I would want to see Ward sit for a half year, or at least until he's ready to go, ready to unseat that veteran starter. I feel like at times he plays hero ball, right? He's constantly looking for the big play down the field. And although it works sometimes, it could also backfire, where in the NFL, where you have faster players, smarter players, you're looking at how defensive coordinators are now used to coaching and coordinating against mobile quarterbacks with big play potential, right? It's not such a unicorn thing anymore. So I doubt that the amount of big plays down the field are going to continue to happen at that clip. We could probably see more interceptions. We could probably see more deep sacks backwards, because there's a lot of times where Cam Ward will start going like south as opposed to like east-west. He'll start moving backwards, trying to make a play, right? Can't find anybody. Rush is bearing down on him, and he keeps on going backwards, like trying to extend the play. And all of a sudden you see this huge loss of 15, loss of 20. There's plays too where he just, again, it kind of, all these cons kind of bleed into each other, but just not giving up on the play, not just throwing it away, not just throwing it in the dirt, trying to continue to find something if nothing is there. So that's really where I feel, like, okay, he could use some time to develop. Maybe he could be put in a system that can get him on track early with, slants and screens and quick little turnaround, quick little curl routes early on in games to get him in a rhythm. And then we can start opening it up down the field. Almost putting Cam Ward in a system where he's on a one-way track early in the game, but then as the game moves on, you now start hitting those vertical passes down the field. One thing I don't want to see with Cam Ward, whoever he lands with, is the team maybe forcing him to duplicate exactly what we've seen at Miami, where he's constantly throwing the football down the field, where if there's a lot of interceptions, if there's a lot of incompletions, if there's just a lot of just unsuccessful plays, I don't want Cam Ward's confidence to be shot like, I can't do this. I feel like starting him off, whether it's early in his career, earlier in the games, with the short, easy stuff first. I mean, we heard that all the time with Zach Wilson, right? But Zach Wilson couldn't complete the easy stuff. I think that's really the ideal setup for Cam Ward. Now, when it comes to Shedeur Sanders, he actually has a lot of qualities that I love, right? I think probably my favorite thing about Shedeur Sanders is he takes care of the football by making good decisions. You constantly see Shedeur Sanders completing footballs, finding the open guy. How is he doing that? Because his football IQ is so high to where he can get up to the line of scrimmage and say, okay, you know what? I understand what I'm looking at from a defensive perspective. And then when I snap the ball and the defense adjusts, I have, again, the understanding, the overall football wherewithal to completely get what the defense is doing now, compile all that information, and still be able to adjust on the fly mid-play. Now, personally, the reason why I feel like he's so far along in that department is, of course, because he's Deion Sanders' son. He's been around the game for such a long time. He's been around high-level players. He's been around high-level coaches just for such a long time, right? Literally since he was a kid. Because you have that connection with his, with his pops. And then, of course, you're also looking at the Colorado offensive coordinator. It's Pat Shurmur, someone who's had so much time in the NFL. In my opinion, he's gotten Shedeur to a point where he's not going to be overwhelmed by, okay, here's your offensive system. Here's what defenses are going to do to you. He's really received some really, really good coaching. So besides the football IQ and the decision making and the overall completion percentage, which I believe was over 73%, Sanders wins from the pocket. He's accurate. This is someone who, you look at all three phases of the passing game, the short game, the intermediate game, the deep game, he can hurt defenses in all three. You hear people talk about maybe the lack of arm strength. That's fair. I don't think Shedeur Sanders has like this elite, Josh Allen, Pat Mahomes, Justin Herbert level of arm, but I do think it's good enough at the NFL level. I don't think we're going to see like a Luke Falk or a Gardner Minshew situation where passes beyond, 25 yards are just like floating ducks and they're just kind of like wobblers. That's not the case with Shedeur. I think he has a good enough arm. And I also think that Sanders actually fits the Jets system. I was about to say the Lions system, the Jets system really, really well. When you talk about someone who is probably going to be relying on the running back position, right? A lot of running the football, a lot of getting into second and third and shorts, having to work off of play action, having to hit guys over the middle of the field off of those play action passes. I think, and you're really not asking the quarterback to throw it and drop back 40 times a game, and there's all this vertical downfield passing, right? I think Shedeur Sanders' ideal system is probably something similar to what the Jets want to run compared to maybe a Cam Ward style of system. But even with all that said, I still feel like Sanders should probably sit early. For pro comparisons, I would probably say Sanders reminds me a lot of Geno Smith now with Seattle, someone who has mobility, someone who does take care of the football, someone who does, complete the football at a pretty high rate, someone who has a good enough arm, but it's not an elite arm, but still gets the job done. Very similar upper body throwing mechanics as well. With Cam Ward, it's a little different because you don't really know what version of Cam Ward you're going to see at the NFL level, because a lot of the game, a lot of Ward's game comes off of the broken, or, comes off of extending plays. I would say, there's moments where you're like, hey man, that's like a Caleb Williams type of moment back at USC. And then there's other moments where it's like, that's like a Jameis Winston moment in the NFL, where he's trying to make something out of nothing. Maybe he just forces a ball deep down the field, and it's just like, oh, this would not fly at the NFL. This would easily be picked off if you're going up against an NFL, free safety back there along with that corner. So it should be interesting to see how this whole thing plays out. Anyway, let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. Thanks so much for watching, and as always, go Jets.